right. Good afternoon, Eris. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. Thank you for joining me, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us. We wanted to talk about autism spectrum disorder today. Um, And not only do I have my sister who is a mental health therapist, she is also the mother of a child on the spectrum, and that is him peeking his little head into the camera. So, Eric,
Okay.
you want to go ahead?
Hi, thanks for having us, Quisha. Yes, I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I've been in the mental health field for 20 years now in different positions, starting with working just in colleges and community mental health, hospitals, mobile mental health crisis, now managed care, case management, private practice work, but none of that prepared me for this best role, which is mom, and more specifically, mom to Miles. And he is many things. On the spectrum is just one of them, and doesn't define him, but does allow for some challenges at times. But he meets them wonderfully, and we try to meet them gracefully. I will say our background and his father as well, being in the mental health world, we picked up tidbits and we know people, so that helped. We had some great insider assistance when we first got the diagnosis. But we can get into all that later. I know we're going to talk about all these things. So thank you for the, just wanted to let you know a little bit about me and Miles.
Absolutely. And, my sister shared with me the quote that if you meet one person with autism, you have met one person with autism. So we want to stress that um, every person that is on the spectrum is an individual. So there is no one size fits all for this diagnosis. Now, we wanted to give a few tips for life as an autism caregiver or parent. The first thing we wanted to talk about is the importance of over explaining things. Now, let me start out by saying that as it is with raising any child, you're going to need a lot of patience. So patience is key. Okay. When I say over explain, so whereas you would tell a typical child, don't do this, don't do that, we're saying that it is beneficial to go more in depth. So not only are you going to give do's and don'ts, but you're going to explain why those do's and don'ts are important so that it sticks more. Eris, if you'd like to step in right here and give your advice on over explaining. We discussed, sarcasm and safety and things of that nature. So if you want to talk about that, that'd be great.
Yeah, I know just second the one person is one person, but in general, the core of getting a diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder, or ASD as I'll call it, is a neuroatypical way of viewing the world that interferes with kind of our idea of what appropriate social skills and social communication interpretation is. And so, with over explaining, you want to be very concrete in your statements. So, for instance, with my son, if I say, go wash your face, if I tell maybe one of my nieces to go do that, it's kind of understood in the morning. I mean to completely get ready for for the day. Whereas Miles will go and wash his face, period, because I didn't say wash your face, brush your teeth, put on deodorant, and then put on your clothes. Like things do need to be spelled out very plainly.
Yes,
Um,
and we talked about, perhaps using a visual schedule. I know that you and Miles's father have one for him at home, and then a lot of times we see them in the school system, in the school setting as well. So, parents, caregivers, even if it's, I know they said, where did you get yours, Eris?
it was an online proprietor. I cannot remember the name of them, but they are plentiful on Amazon and even private sellers. If you just look for visual aids, we got one for the morning routine, one for the night routine. I know other parents have them for mealtime prep. Just anything that it for people to physically see what's going to happen step after step is very helpful. And if you just kind of Google that, and I'll put a link in the meeting to where I got mine after I searched for it, but it's very nice. It had a kid brushing his teeth, it had a kid with a washcloth to wash his face, it had the clothes for getting dressed. Those things have been very helpful in the beginning in making sure Miles understood what was expected of him.
Okay, fabulous. And so, with safety, that is a huge thing as well. Sometimes explaining the need to look both ways, because a lot of times with ASD, um, you could appear to be not really aware of the circumstances or the situation around you. So you definitely want to over explain safety, um, why it's important not to run out in the street, or, talk to someone that you don't necessarily know. What could happen? What are the consequences that one would face? So when we say over explain, we mean that in every facet of life for your ASD baby. Um, Go ahead.
No, I just wanted to add, and over explain doesn't mean just in that instance. For us, at least, over explain means each time until it
Absolutely.
becomes a muscle memory or something like information that he can easily access. And I mean, it took years, and sometimes
Yes.
we still have to reiterate the morning routine. So
Yeah.
over explain is not just in the instance, but can mean over a lot of time.
Yes, and a lot of times visuals are very important for that over explanation, as we've already said. Sarcasm is something that generally needs to be explained, because um, those on the spectrum tend to be very, very concrete. And so, there's a lack of, what's the term, Iris, that I want?
There's not a lot of oh gosh, now I'm blanking on words.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Abstract. Yes,
Thank
they
you.
they 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 tend, and again, autism presents differently in everyone, but there's a tendency to lack that abstract, or that exaggerated thought that typical people tend to have. So over explain, yes, very important. Make sure you get some visuals. Make sure you have some patience. The other over that we wanted to discuss is over love. And so what do we mean by that, sis?
Um, I want to pick up on the patience piece
Okay.
because that's parenthood, that's caregiving, period, right? So with this though, as I mentioned, for me, where patience had to come in is understanding that it's almost like Groundhog Day. Every day is just a new start until it becomes ingrained in the memory or both thinking, working knowledge, and also muscle memory. But every day is explaining, every day is saying, this is what we're going to do, A, B, C, and D steps. And it was a challenge for me to understand that and to be okay with that. and the patience that you need to have for your child or the person you're providing care to, you also need to extend to yourself and to
Absolutely.
whomever, if you are raising, if you're married or you're co-parenting, or you're an educator in the classroom, it's not going to be, and most kids don't pick up things right away anyway, but this is an extreme that really does require you tapping into an understanding that the person is really doing the best that they can in that moment. And in that moment, what they need is for you to be um, calm. What I had to understand when my son was a toddler was the kind of yelling or reprimanding or punishment that I at least grew up with and we were used to doesn't work in this sense. It's too abstract. My facial expression looks angry. I'm saying things loudly. What does that mean, to someone who is not quite sure what your face is saying or why you're suddenly louder? It is taking a breath. It is saying, you did this action, this led this is leading to this reaction from me. This is the consequence of your action. I mean, it is basic. So the over loving is twofold. It is for the child and it is for yourself. You have to be forgiving. Sometimes you're only human. You're not going to be as patient as maybe you should be. And that's okay, because that then moves into, for me at least, encouragement. And that's another twofold thing. Um, you continue to encourage your child. I mean, that's what all of us need in life is, encouragement to keep doing the things that we need to do to grow. But encouragement for yourself, which kind of leads me into talking about, we want to try another core deficit or thing that helps people identify ASD is the socialization piece, not having those social skills, identifying facial um, um, reactions, gestures, tone, these kind of things get missed a lot of the time. So um, you want to get help. You can't do it on your own. And I know a lot of people have, well, for us, for example, me and Mouse's dad, we have joined a caregiver for young kids support group, and when I say it was a lifeline, I mean, it's just wonderful to get the kind of reinforcement or validation from the things that you're feeling. And when you feel bad for that time you yelled or you didn't quite understand what your kid was trying to say to you, because speech is another identifying diagnosis for ASD, the delay in speech or the unintelligible speech or no speech. Um, but to have people validate, that it is a hard journey for you as well as a child, and you're all going to need support. Um, it's just constantly feeding that love. It has to be fed into you so you can then feed it into your child.
Yeah, because in a lot of situations, and Eris, thank you so much for sharing. The reason why I wanted you to help me with this video is because you come from personal experience. And I think that there is nothing more important. There is no, the expertise. You have the most expertise when it's something that you are living. You can go to school for these things, and I did. However, you're speaking from personal everyday experience. And in my opinion, yeah, the books are great to learn things, but when you actually live it, that's when you're an expert. I can speak from a family perspective, but I have not lived autism on a everyday basis. And so your knowledge is just, it's very important for this video. So again, thank you for joining me. I want to speak to socialization, the overlove for when ASD kids come to school, because they do have an awareness that they show up in the classroom and in the world differently. because they are so concrete. And, you know, a lot of things around us, especially when we get into the school atmosphere, it can be all over the place. So to send your child to school that's on the spectrum with that abundance of love, it definitely helps them to just feel better about themselves and to have that confidence that they may not have otherwise, because, you know, they're trying to make friends, and that doesn't necessarily always come off the way that they want it to, because, you know, sometimes it's hard for students on the spectrum to get those vibes. Those interactions with other people don't always, they're not able to answer to the inferencing that they're getting from their peers. So that's why I think it's very important that they have an abundance of confidence and that they're put into social situations. Eris spoke about the social group that she has Miles in and that she and her husband interact with. And I just think that's so important for raising an ASD child.
Absolutely. Which, you know, you kind of led into school and socialization in general. So I don't know if you wanted to talk about the resources that we've taken advantage of, the ones I would encourage other people to look into. And I just recently had a conversation with a friend, very intelligent, her husband as well, um, a doctor even, but really didn't know where to start. And
Right.
we were lucky enough that we had a pediatrician who felt like his speech was delayed, even accounting for the fact that he was being raised bilingually and that he was male, who tend to develop speech later, and referred us to a developmental pediatrician. And I would say
Yes.
that was a great place to start. Those are doctors, pediatricians, but they're specifically trained in looking at the different developmental stages for children. So they've got a bit of a neurological and a psychological bent as well to help you understand if there are any areas of concern. And really, he monitored Miles for 2 years. And that included visits where he himself interviewed Miles. He took our concerns to heart. We filled out questionnaires and rating scales. And then after a couple of years, got the diagnosis.
Okay. And then, so from an educational point of view, if your child is 2 or 3, you can Google, you know, the school in your area, the public school in your area. And if you're wondering or if you're thinking that your child might be on the spectrum or have, you know, any concerns at that point, if you're feeling like they're developmentally delayed, then you're going to want to visit your public school for your neighborhood. And what you want to do is put in writing that you are interested in early intervention services and that you are requesting an evaluation for your child. And the reason you want to put that in writing is because legally, the school system has 30 days to respond to your request. I'm not saying they have 30 days to test your child. I'm saying they have 30 days to gather the needed information, to gather the personnel, and they're going to sit down and meet with you, listen to your concerns, and then from there, they'll devise a plan to move forward, whether that be psychological testing, whether that be visiting the developmental pediatrician, as Eris spoke about, but you're getting the ball rolling. And the services, of course, are free to you because it's through the public school system. So that's definitely something that I would encourage parents to do.
All right. Yeah. And I completely agree with that. We didn't really know about that. And I think, well, I don't think, I know several parents who have gone that route and have found a lot of help through their local public school system. We came to that kind of late, but we have also been helped out there greatly. And I know you're going to get into all that with testing IEPs, that kind of thing. The other thing I would say on like the more mental health side of things is testing if your insurance covers it through a psychologist. I know a lot of commercial plans, meaning insurance plans you get through an employer, they cover it to an extent. Medicaid, meaning the state insurance plan, um, they you have to get it pre-authorized, but sometimes it will be approved. And so a psychologist can do a series of tests to also give you that information if you're looking for a diagnosis or you have concerns about your child. Another area I know some people go through is a neurologist. That's not there is there's not debate about ASD being neurological, but it is a neuroatypical development. But I think for kids very, very young, developmental pediatrician, school system, those are the areas really best to go through. Just in
Yes.
starting and getting the information.
Yes.
Um,
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you
no,
off.
no,
So
you're fine.
your pediatrician, a developmental pediatrician, going to your neighborhood school system. And a lot of times, either the developmental pediatrician or the school system has outside resources. So they might um, refer you to a parent group or a social group. Eris and I wanted to talk about tools and resources that are available to families that have a member on the spectrum.
Yeah, I really want to plug our family loves our local autism society. This is a nationwide thing, and ours is called the Autism Society of Central Virginia, ASCV. They offer a number of educational, recreational activities and groups for um, parents, teens, young children, all caregivers related to ASD. We have had a number of social events, educational workshops. They have a resource directory for sports and camps, anything, providers to
Yes.
help you if you are someone who has ASD or caring for someone with ASD. I recommend them highly. They are pretty much all over the country, usually your bigger metro areas, but if you go to their website, you can find them, and I highly recommend them. The support group that we go to for them is just, it's phenomenal. You meet all kinds of people because this ASD is not specific to any race, class. It is more prevalent in boys, but I think that's slowly changing as we recognize that it just looks different in girls. Um, Adults who are coming to understand that their struggles while they were children is related to having ASD as well or being on the spectrum. Learning language is another thing. Some people say they have ASD, some people say they are autistic. It really is a preference. It's just a community, and you learn a lot about the community being in these groups. And like anything, it's best not to go it alone. Find support.
Yeah. Thank you, Eris. And there are a lot of different therapies out there that your child, your family might be involved with. I know there's a lot of controversy over ABA therapy. However, it has evolved a little, and Eris had a fabulous point that you should always do your research on the person that is providing those therapies, just so you know what their methodologies are. Um, how do people that have worked with them in the past, how do they rate them? Did they find it successful? So definitely, and here's the thing, I know that this sounds like a lot, but guys, I implore you to make this a community effort, make this a village effort. So, as the parent of a special needs child myself, my sister who lives in a different state, she would help me with the research. So maybe you have somebody that's great at looking things up that your child could be a part of as far as socialization. So you want to have different people that help you in different areas so that everything is not on your shoulders, because it's very easy to get overwhelmed with raising a child in general. And when you need additional supports, you definitely want to have people around you that can support you in different ways. You know, you might have someone that's very good with someone on the spectrum and they could do your babysitting, but someone else can find your communities, and so on and so on. So please don't make this something that you alone go at, because that's the fastest way to exhaust yourself.
Absolutely, Quisha. I just co-sign everything you just said. I would just mention the other resources that are very common with children with ASD. There's speech therapy. We had that initially because that was the main defining issue we saw with Miles was a delay in speech. There's also feeding and nutritional therapies. A lot of times these children have very, very particular tastes and also an inability to handle certain textures or foods. So those therapies come in handy. And all these, usually you're going to get a referral from your doctor's office, physical therapies, occupational therapies. That was very helpful in like what is it called? Like pincer and hand-eye coordination things for
Yes,
minds.
yes,
With tying shoes, blowing your nose. I mean, like you when we talk about over explaining, I really do mean almost everything.
yes,
So everything is from ground up. Um, ABA uses social skills groups, so they'll have a group of peers. Miles has been in a group for almost 3 years now. Um, Actually, I think it is 3 years this month, where he and these um, the group changes a lot, but he and like three core boys, they've come together weekly to have conversation with one another, practicing taking turns in conversation, elaborating on ideas, um, and we've seen such growth from that. ABA
yes,
also uses a lot of social stories, and that's a technique where you use the child in an actual story, kind of a not a fairy tale setting, but literally the first one our son ever had was about losing things and being okay. While something's lost, we look for it, and then when we find it, yay, you know. But learning how to handle the frustration of not having what you want when you want it, and that's ongoing. We're still doing it. We're
yes,
still doing
yes. Like you said, repetition is very important. And we use a lot of social stories in the education environment. You can also access those on your own. You can Google social stories. Eris was saying earlier that there are a lot of social stories on Pinterest. You know, so sign up for Pinterest if you need to. Those are things that you can do before bedtime every night, and then you're reinforcing what your child is learning at school and in their social group, and so on and so on.
Exactly. And I would say something Keisha brought up when we were talking about this, it's so important, is family therapy or counseling or however you get it, where the whole family is able to kind of debrief, explore the different feelings around frustration and patience and how are we setting up, because as Keisha mentioned, structure is so important for every child, but especially if you're raising, caring for a child with ASD, to know what to expect day after day it's just fundamental.
Oh, yes.
So how is your family going to set up family life? Where do shoes go? Where do keys go? In this age of COVID, where are the masks that we remember to grab every time we walk out the door? I mean, these are all, uh, the family system is so important, and it's important for everyone who's involved in the family and the care is all on the same page. And we make sure to try and check in with one another about weekly, just to make sure that, we understand what is expected and how it's going to be done and what the consequences are if it's not. Consequences, teaching those and explaining those is a big part of life, parenting. But again, with ASD, it's kind of like magnified. You have to make sure that all these things are very clear.
Definitely. Absolutely. All right, Eris, thank you so much. We know that there are families out there that are going through hardships, that are struggling. My heart goes out to every family with someone on the spectrum in this pandemic, because everything got turned upside down. Routines got turned upside down, school, work. So we know that your loved ones had to adjust, and they had to do it with little to no time. So we're rooting for you. We're sending out positive vibes. We see you, and we understand the struggle, and if there is anything that we can do to help. I am a special needs life coach. um, I will put my link in the description if you need any coaching for your special needs child or family. And then Eris, of course, I'll let you speak. I don't want to speak for you.
Well, as I mentioned, I'm a licensed clinical social worker, LCSW. So I work with adults, mostly with, depression, anxiety. I do what I call clinical consultations, though. So if you want to go more in depth about resources, especially in your area, how to access the things that your insurance can provide, or if you're looking for some short-term solution-focused counseling, then I'm happy to do that. And I'll put a link to my information, as well.
All right, Eris, thank you so much for joining me. Really
Thank you.
appreciate your time. We hope that you all take care of yourselves first, because if you don't care for yourself, then you cannot care for others. So stay well and be blessed. And thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, and I agree.
Bye-bye.
Bye. And that's a wrap.